So today we get the pleasure of talking to Kim Hartman, and today we're going to discuss boundaries. First, before we get started though, if you want to hear about Kim's story of her, she's on episode number 17, and it's about Am I Depressed or Is It the Relationship, where she talks about her experience with domestic abuse. And we won't get into that. We're going to focus on a new topic. So thanks for being here, Kim.
Thanks for having me. This is my favorite topic.
And the reason why, that's why you're on the podcast, because one of Kimberly's skills that she's developed from being in her challenging relationship and all of that is she's become really, really great at boundaries. And I talk about boundaries a lot, but I felt like, Kim, you're going to add a whole new flavor.
Okay.
So why do you think, as an overly kind girl or a person, with both of our raisings having some similarities, that we tend to want to play small or just blend in? And I don't think boundaries was ever a word I ever thought of, to be honest. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, never. That was never, ever a paradigm that I was familiar with till like my mid-30s. It was a while.
What made you get interested in boundaries, Kim?
Yeah. Well, I would say because the way that I was doing life wasn't working anymore. Like I just think you hit a wall at some point and you have to contend with it. And I would have avoided that if I could have, right? If I could have just kept doing it the way that I'd learned how to do. That worked really well for a long time. I would have, but it just didn't anymore. It was costing way too much. And I had a good therapist bring it up, not even calling it boundaries, but just referring to some of my behaviors that I was using to get my needs met. And it was ineffective. Yeah.
So go into that a little bit more, the cost of not having boundaries and what you were called out on.
Yeah. So I was called out for kind of being manipulative and dishonest. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, well, that's not who I am as a person. I'm a nice person, right? I'm a kind person, which I have to say, like, that's how I kind of identify, but the behaviors were not that kind, really. And they were not honest, and they were not that nice. And I was actually really resentful for all of the kind, nice things I was doing, right? Or some of them. And so it was kind of the dishonesty of it and having someone that I trusted say, that's actually manipulation, right? To like trying to get your needs met in an indirect way is actually kind of manipulative, right? And so, that was a hard thing to face, I think, the dishonesty piece, right?
Yeah. Can you give an example though? Because I think a lot of it can be so normalized rather than speaking directly and having boundaries. So can you think of an example of an indirect or a manipulative way of getting your needs met?
Oh gosh, so many. What's a good one? So at the time, I think it referred to mostly how, in a romantic relationship, right? I mean, that relationship is failing anyways for a lot of reasons. But instead of coming out and saying, I need clarity, right, on this agreement. So an example would be, perfect example. We would agree to be on time somewhere, or in my mind, we agreed to be at a certain place at a certain time. And then he would show up 30 minutes late, before we were to leave. Let's say we're going to leave at 7 and he would show up at 7:30. And so I would feel frustrated and resentful about that because I thought had an agreement that we were going to leave at 7 because it starts at 7:15 or something like that. But I was never clear about it. And then instead of just asking for that or saying, let's agree to leave at a certain time, I would find little ways to manipulate him to do the behavior I wanted. So I would maybe say it starts at 6:30, right? That kind of thing. And so I was getting less honest as time went on.
Yes.
Right? Or I would say yes to something and I really felt like no, right? And so then I would try to, instead of being the person that said no, because I wasn't comfortable with that, I would try to sort of rearrange things so that it was more appealing to me. You know?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I think we have to hit this wall of like, hey, this isn't working. And kind of the definition of crazy is doing the same thing and expecting getting the same result. Like doing the same thing and expecting a different result is the definition of crazy.
Yeah. Insanity or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so I wanted to like appear. I found out, I think, that the basis of my issue with boundaries is that, well, one, you know, when you're younger, maybe asking for your needs directly wasn't received well. And so you don't actually learn what they are or how to do that. And all you learn is like an indirect approach, right, to get your needs met. And so, it just was so pervasive throughout my life, like just using indirect methods, right? That it felt like the right thing because it was what was asked of me for so many years and so many people liked me better that way. You know, because then I appear like, oh, I don't have any needs. I don't have any at all.
Yeah, kind of the fawning, like blend in.
Yeah.
Cause a ruckus, won't stand out.
Yeah. And then also, I'll take responsibility for yours too, right? So it was just no clarity about where I started and began, or where I began or where I ended. I had no clarity on that whatsoever. None. To the point where I wasn't able to make safe decisions for myself in relationship.
That makes sense. And that's a great definition of like where you end, where another person begins, what's on your side of the street and all of that. And the ways that used to work with us as our, you know, blueprint growing up doesn't serve us sometimes. So
no, yeah. Right? Yeah. Yep. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
yes, you did a great job answering that. I feel like in order to have boundaries, we have to know ourselves and know what's important to us and actually acknowledge that we do have needs and wants and desires that are specific to us. That's a hard thing there.
Oh, it really is, right? Like to be able to just that is so huge. That's like the start of it, right? Because at first I thought, okay, boundaries are just going to be this thing that like, so I can dictate like to others what they can do around me or whatever so that I feel more regulated. That's fine. I don't like that. Don't do that around me. I don't like it when you do that. Don't do that around me, right? And so it started with this very rigid, weird, kind of reactive approach to it. And then I'm like, oh goodness, I actually have to figure out who I am as a person and be okay with having a need. Do you know, like, did you have a first need that came out of boundaries for you, like, or that came up?
I think the need to feel emotionally safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that was a big deal, to be respected.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I had always heard, oh, women just need love, men need respect. And I'm like, dude, I need some respect. So I need to feel like what my thoughts and feelings are actually important because they were not part of the equation. It wasn't part of the equation. So I would say the emotional safety to be able to verbalize my thoughts and feelings and for it to be received.
Yeah.
Not accepted. That's not about we have to agree. It's like being willing to be listened to. That is important.
Yeah. Yeah,
What about you?
Because then you can start to have those conversations around what your needs are, right? Which I think we need some reflection from people we trust to help with that. I think mine was, the first one was, you don't get to decide what I'm worth. And that sounds like not a boundary, but it was almost like this first start of like, oh, I get, like that's for me. And that doesn't have anything to do with you or what you think of me. Yeah.
Which is huge because I think we're automatically taught, like, if everyone else is happy, what they think of us, that's what matters. But knowing that is actually not true.
Right. And then it was like that like roller coaster kind of was able to slow down a little bit and be like, if I'm not reacting based off of what what you think my self-worth is, and me trying to change your opinion of that, if that's like up to me to decide, right? That's my business. Then I'm a lot calmer and more regulated.
That's great.
I think that's where it started.
Have you gone through a breakup that's kind of left you rattled and maybe questioning yourself some? Do you find that you're a pretty kind person that's chronically overgiving, overfunctioning, and maybe you're just plain tired and maybe a little resentful? Do you feel like you're going through the motions of life, but you're not really living your life? Well, that's what the Unravel Notebook is for. It's 61 days for you to create your life by intent and unravel your thoughts and beliefs so you can connect with God, yourself, and others in a better, more intentional way and live brighter. Then how did it progress? Because right now I would definitely call you a boundary boss. But it's a progression. I can see where I'm at in this stage and still growing, and we should always be growing, but it's kind of fun to reflect on your like journey as far as start with that, and then, you defining your worth and your worthiness.
Yeah.
And how do you go from there?
And then I think once you start like that self-acceptance piece and you're going kind of internal, for that, I feel like then you can start to accept some of your needs and wants a little bit. And then I think it's a matter of being honest with yourself. So then you can at least distinguish, you at least know. And I think you would feel in your body and you're like, oh, that's what that feeling's been all these years. That tension is that I'm being dishonest with myself and with other people. And why, right? And this sort of gentleness why do I feel the need to be dishonest in this moment? Either with myself, is it something that I'm ashamed of, a need or a want that I'm not comfortable with? Or is it because I don't feel safe? Or what is it that's getting in the way of honesty, right? And it's like that. And then there's this commitment of like, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be an honest person. And in order to do that, that means I have to accept that other people have a right to say no to me. Other people have a right to, to set their own boundaries with me. And that might mean I don't always get what I want in relationship, right? And then how do I come to terms with that and be able to be uncomfortable and sit with that? And it sounds awful, but it really is the funnest work, I think, that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's all about honesty, right?
Yes. And like you said, being honest with myself, man, that was the hard part. And people kind of laugh like, you're not honest. I'm like, oh gosh, no. I would much rather be dishonest and say, I honestly don't feel good. And I honestly have this need. And I'm honestly not okay. And that's going to upset people, and to be okay with that.
Yeah. And upset people. And also if I say, I'm honestly not okay, and then they're not able to show up for you for whatever reason, and then it's contending with that, right? That you stand here and the thing you want is across the canyon, right? And you might not be able to get it and still be okay.
Yes. Having our own back, gosh, I think and showing up for ourselves, I think is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where that trust in yourself, not only to ask for clarity when you need it so that you can keep yourself safe. All that stuff is so important. I remember I went on a date with this guy. Well, it wasn't a date. Okay. We're just friends. We're friends. We're having dinner. But he was very flirty and he wanted to pay, and it felt very much like date energy. Right. And I remember in the dinner, I was just stopped and I was like, this is making me uncomfortable. I don't like this ambiguity. It only serves you. Like, is this a date or are we friends? Like, and he's like, oh, we're flirty friends. And I'm like, no, because that lack of clarity makes it impossible for me to make safe decisions for myself. So no, I'm not into that.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. And it wasn't like, you can't be that way. It's like, I'm not into this. So I'm okay losing the friendship. I'm okay losing whatever this is. I'll pay for my own dinner. I don't need your attention. Whatever it is, I don't need it as much as I need to be able to keep myself safe. And at that point I was like, oh, and it was uncomfortable. Boy, was he uncomfortable. And I was fine. I was regulated and I was fine. And I'm like, that's a win.
That's wonderful. Because I think feeling regulated after we just start giving boundaries and, doing boundaries is very, it's a process.
Yeah. Do you remember when you first felt like it was that night and day, like that you were changing in that way?
Definitely. It was transformational, but it was also going from the overly kind girl to an empowered kindness where God loves me and I'm valuable, and in that platform, and God created me uniquely, in all of us are in his image in some way, and to appreciate that, and then be able to be honest about what works for me and what doesn't work for me.
Yeah. And that's really where I got my self-worth from. Finally, I was like, that's between me and God, like only,
And he loves us. Like, I always think about like some perceptions of God as like this judgmental white-haired guy and, all of this stuff. But the amount of love that he has for us and delight.
Yeah.
Really ourselves that we are enough without performing. I think I was definitely a performer. Like if I just work harder and do better, then I can get my needs met.
Yeah. And I
love and affection that I want.
Yes. And I think about how unfair that is. Like now when I feel that from others, I think about how hard it is to be put in that position to have to fill up somebody in that way, how that doesn't feel like a reciprocal relationship. I don't know.
No, it doesn't feel. So we're going to get right into relationships, because relationship boundaries, because that's like really, I think you're really good at giving examples. And that's what I kind of want to get into a little bit more. Like, what does a boundary for Kim look like? And all of us are a little bit different. But one thing you're really good at is just really speaking clearly, and you're really gifted at that. So when it comes to you're in a wonderful relationship and you've been very clear about who you are, what you want, what you need, and respectful to where he's at as well, give me some examples of boundaries within a relationship and how that is a whole different thing in this relationship and how it's like really a beautiful thing.
Okay. So one of my, thank you. I'm so excited. Okay. So one of my kids kind of taught me this one actually, because, but it's transferred over into my current relationship, my romantic relationship. But we have this phrase in our family that who defines help? Like, because you'll hear people say, oh, I was just trying to be helpful, right? Or whatever. And so we'll say, well, what is help? So for instance, if, I'm trying to get out the door, right? And my daughter's putting on her shoes and I bend down I'm in a hurry. So I'm like, I'm just going to tie these for you. And then she gets frustrated about me getting in there to tie her shoes for her. And think about how many times we do that for people, right? We're like, I'm going to help. I'm going to get in the middle and I'm going to help because I see an opportunity and they obviously need it. And then they're mad about it. They don't receive that well, right? Or they're not grateful. They don't have the reaction we want. And so I think the phrase applies to being helpful, but it's specific to that, but it applies to lots of things. So we say in our family, who defines what's helpful? The person helping or the person being helped? And it's the person being helped gets to define what's helpful, right? And so you have to be able to accept that what you want to do for somebody isn't necessarily what they find helpful. So I'm going out of town. And my partner is going to come and like help me with my animals, like take my dog for a walk, right? And he goes, I was thinking I could tile your fireplace while you're gone. And I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want that. And he's like, I figured you would say no. And I had this instant reaction of like, oh, so I'm the bad guy because I said no to your idea, right? There was like this exchange, right? Where I'm trying to do something nice and you're just like, don't want it, right? And I had this like icky feeling to it. And I was like, listen, I don't like this setup, right? Like, here's how this could have gone. You could have said, you're going to be out of town for a while. I have some free time on my hands, and I would like to do something for you that you would find helpful while you're gone, so that when you got back, you felt like something was taken off your plate. Are there some things that would make you feel that way? And so I suggested that to him, and he was like, well, then you might suggest that I go pick up dog poop in the backyard, and I don't want to do that, and then I'm the bad guy. And I'm like, see, that right there, I have a problem with, right? Like, we're not being honest. Like, you're not being honest, right? You don't want to say no to me, so you're making a situation so I'm saying no to you. It's gross, right? Like, that's gross. Mm-hmm. Let's not do that. So it's just, and I feel like we have so many opportunities for that, where we could take something that's slightly, it's just like, it's not 180 degrees off from the truth. It's like 20 degrees off from the truth. And it's a little insidious, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's great that you can talk to him about that, because you're right. If you were to say, well, could you do the dog poop? He could say, well, actually, I don't really want to do that. And that's very honest as far as what I want, what you want. But we do these dance arounds where we're not talking directly and saying, would be super helpful. This is important to me, different things like that.
Yes. Right. And so I find that, and then that's it's a mild example in a relationship, right? When you think about something, when it has to do with money or intimacy or the holidays or anything that's like really like loaded emotionally, it just gets even harder to kind of dig through. That's crap. Like that's nonsense. Like, what are we really talking about? Yeah.
So getting to the heart of what's important, what people are really wanting, needing, and thinking, both parties. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. And then I've had to admit that I'm actually not that flexible, right? Like, I'm not a kind of person, like, he'll want me to go do something, and I'm like, if I'm being honest, I'm not into that, and I don't want to spend my time that way, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of a selfish person with my time, right? But I'm selfish about my time right now. That's who I am, so I have to admit that, right?
So you kind of probably define that, selfish with your time, because I know you, Kim, what you're talking about is your life is super full with your work and what's going on, and you have limited energy, ability, resources, and so you're choosing to spend that in a way that actually revives you.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. I'm glad you're making it, especially for this podcast. Like, selfishness has such a bad connotation, but I just don't feel as negatively about it. But you're right. I'm putting that into something that provides the most value to me. And that's something that probably still feels selfish, but it really is. I'm so much happier.
It's really self-care, in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's really hard for me to just admit that I can still have self-worth and value without having to give all of myself to what other people value and want me to give, right? That's still such a challenge. Yeah.
And taking care of ourselves. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean, honestly?
Yeah.
And I love how you keep bringing up that you have to listen to your body when it comes to like a boundary, like something's not feeling right, and you're really in tune to that. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. You know what I'm feeling like that. You know that feel. I don't know where everybody gets it, but it's just like,
and I just want to be in the head and be like, oh, no. Like, we can make this work. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I've learned to be like, okay, I got to lead with these feelings because it's telling me that something's not okay. And I need to respect that and listen and like get to that.
Yes. And I do know that sometimes it's okay too to mess it up. Like, I commit to things still that I'm like, oh, damn it. That's not in alignment, but also I have a value of following through, with what I commit to. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to follow through. And then next time it's okay to feel that icky feeling and to do it. You don't have to correct it right then, right? You can do it next time. You do it better next time,
Yes, yeah. Failing forward with our boundaries. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks for your time.
You bet.
Stay tuned for our next episode.